Good morning. This is Chris Jaddick with TBARTA. Participant PL 130NM. I don't recognize you. Could you introduce yourself, please? Good morning. This is Chris Jaddick with TBARTA. Participant PL 130NM. I don't recognize you. Could you introduce yourself, please? Go out and use it.
Takes the funds to go to the nursing.
It was like, I'm on it, work on the way.
Air tax.
Good morning. If you
Okay.
can hear us
morning.
online, if you could give me a thumbs up. Great, thank you.
I can hear. I'm gonna call our meeting to order. Is that all right with everybody? Yes. Start with a roll call.
Good morning. So, Mr. Cliff Manuel,
Present.
Commissioner Patrick Starkey. Present. Commissioner Renee Flowers. Here. Commissioner Reggie Bellamy. Commissioner Jeff Holcomb.
Here.
Mr. Jim Holton. Commissioner Pat Kim. Commissioner Janet Long. Here. Councilmember Deborah Fitz Sanders. Here. Councilmember Lynn Hurtak. Here. Mayor Ken Welch.
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Overman. Secretary David Gwynn.
Here.
Nicole Mills.
I'm here.
Seven members present.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner Holcomb. I'd like you to lead us in the pledge this morning.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize any public comment we may have this morning.
Mr. Roberts wanted to give a public comment. That's the only one I'm aware of.
Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the TBARTA board. I'm Bill Roberts. I chair your Citizens Advisory Committee. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to make a few comments. I'd like to begin with a few observations from our most recent Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, which was just held this week. The committee wanted you to know that we fully support any efforts to reinvigorate the Transportation Disadvantage Program, the TD program, which unfortunately had to be cut. We are also very supportive of the growing and very exciting van pool commuter services program, which we continue to believe is a major success for TBARTA. The committee has expressed an interest in refreshing and look at the 2018 transportation study that this board commissioned, which included a light rail system serving our region. Without any specific direction, the committee thinks that that's worth a second look, given the changes in technology, the changes in funding that might become available. And finally, the committee also wanted you to know that there is a strong support for a regional smartphone app that would connect all of the transportation facilities and over time implement a facility where customers could use one app to get to regional transit and to connect to the feeder systems on the last mile that would be provided by the local providers. Speaking for myself and not for the committee, I'd like to make just a couple of quick comments, and I appreciate your indulgence. I believe that TBARTA over the past few years has somewhat lost its focus, and I think needs to use this opportunity to look at regional projects that will in fact connect our region in a way that not only facilitates movement of the public, but also excites them and gives them an opportunity to get behind and support what we're doing. Sorry, my 3 minutes is up.
That's not a buzzer review.
Oh, okay. All right. We believe that I believe the discussions with CXX should continue. This is a long-term opportunity for TBARTA, and it should not be sidelined, no pun intended, without considerable effort to try to make that work. And then finally, I would say that this meeting today is a real opportunity for TBARTA to re-energize and think boldly and creatively about how we can serve our region. And I think that sentiment is shared by most, if not all, of the members of your Citizens Advisory Committee who will stand ready and able to support you in any way that you'd like them to. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your opportunity.
The chair recognizes.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
First of all, thank you so much for your dedication to this effort. We really appreciate our citizens who put in their time, and some of us are paid to be here, but you know, it's voluntary for you, and just done such a great job. But I did want to correct you because you mentioned CSX and light rail, and if someone could tell me if I'm wrong, I believe CSX is heavy rail. Is that right? Commuter
If
rail.
it was gonna be on line with freight, couldn't be a light rail.
Yeah, so there's a difference. And I hope that as we talk this morning to some of our new members, we make sure they understand what the difference is as far as equipment,
Yes.
frequency, and those things.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry if I mixed the two.
I do it all the time. I am no
There
expert.
clearly is a distinction between heavy rail commuter service and the light rail system that was
Yeah.
studied in 2018. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your report this morning. I'd like to move into our session today, and probably while we're here, recognize Tina Fisher with Collaborative Labs. Morning.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Welcome. Thank you for being here at the TBARTA Planning Workshop. So glad you can make time out of your busy schedules to be here today. So my name is Tina Fisher. I am manager of Collaborative Labs. I recognize some faces. Raise your hand if you've had a Collaborative Labs experience. Yes, I see lots of friends. For those of you who have not experienced a Collaborative Lab, we've been in existence for 18 years. We've served over 1,000 nonprofits, government entities, private businesses. We have a state-of-the-art facility that's not too far from here off of Omerton Road. But we also come to you, as we've done today. We want to thank PSTA for hosting our workshop today and for our crazy setup with the teams. That's how we work. So thank you, PSTA, and having us here today. As your facilitator, I am the process expert. Yes, I'm using air quotes. I am the process expert. So that means I am your meeting tour guide. For those of you who are golfers, consider me your caddy. So I'm here to help you make your best shot. All right. And you as meeting stakeholders, everybody in the room, you are the content experts. So you're bringing your words of wisdom from all the perspectives that you bring from your communities here today to talk about regional transit. So process expert, content experts, because I'm like you, I'm not a transit authority. So we have all of you in the room to have all this wisdom coming together across our region to talk about transit. Along with me, I have two team members. I have Karen, who is typing furiously over there. She takes meeting notes. So if you haven't experienced a Collaborative Lab, we create the most robust set of meeting notes you've ever seen. We call it our real-time record. It comes to you in 2 business days. So that record will be over to you in a Word document with pictures, all the ideas that came out of today, whether they rose to the top or not. That will come to TBARTA via email on Tuesday. So that she works really hard. So everybody, let's give Karen a hand. We also have PJ, who is our tech guru. He keeps all of our technology running smoothly because in Collaborative Labs, we have a strength-based methodology that we do a lot of team brainstorming. So we get everybody gets a chance to talk and share your opinions, and the teams have your ideas rise to the top, and then we come back together as a group and you can individually prioritize based on your own opinion. So he keeps all that polling technology, everything working for us today. So that is our team. I do have Chris also helping support today. So everybody say thank you, Chris, because he's running our virtual component today. So we do have a couple of folks online virtually. So it adds a different dynamic to our meeting, as you know. So if you have a comment or question and you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Chris will give me the hand signal and let me know that they have a comment or question. Keep your audio muted unless you have a comment or have been recognized, and keep your comments brief and to the point to allow for all of our team discussions. So I believe that is it for virtual. So we don't want to leave you out. Can you tell me, Chris, do we know who's online? I know Nicole Mills from Florida Department of Transportation is online.
At this point, Nicole Mills is the only participant in our panels.
Okay, because I believe we were also expecting Commissioner Overman and Commissioner Bellamy, so let me know if those two folks jump online. I'd like to say hello. All right, thank you. All right, so our agenda today, and you may see at the top of the agenda that this meeting is scheduled till 1, but we only had one gentleman with a public comment. So my goal is to get you out of here by noon, because I know you have a very busy day ahead of you and I want to value your time together. So I plan the workshop to end at noon. So hopefully we'll stay on track and we won't go too much past that. So did I hear hallelujah? So we'll start off with a few TBARTA highlights presented by David Green. Then we will jump into 2 team activities. The first team activity is our value proposition. Why does TBARTA exist and what differentiates it from other transit organizations in our community? So this is a very important conversation that we talk about the value of TBARTA. The second team activity is we're going to, once we realize our value proposition, we're going to talk about our organizational structure and some funding priorities. We will have Ron Pierce from RSA Consulting joining us later in the morning to give us some funding insights before we jump into that conversation. Of course, there's lunch. We have some lunch coming in for those of you who are going to be hungry. And please, at any time, feel free to grab some coffee and breakfast. Keep that energy up. Then we'll talk about next steps. So in this meeting today, as content experts, I'm going to ask that you put your regional transit hat on. I know sometimes it's difficult because we have our focus, our perspective, our constituents, but this is regional transit and we're talking about the value and success of TBARTA. So that is the attitude and the optimism that we are carrying today in the planning workshop. Does that sound good for an agenda today? All right, wonderful. So next, I will bring up David Green, and Executive Director of TBARTA.
Thank you, Tina. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our board workshop. I know there have been some very fair questions recently about TBARTA, so hope we can have a good, honest conversation today about the future of the agency. Before I get started, I want to thank Collaborative Labs and the partnership for helping pull this together today. Believe it or not, it was only 2 short weeks ago when the idea of a workshop was first mentioned. Unfortunately, Bamitra is not available today to facilitate, but she did suggest a plan B. So everyone immediately began coordinating, and we were able to pull this together so we could take advantage of the time that we have available to us today. So big thank you to Tina and Collaborative Labs for working with us on such short notice, and also to Bamitra and the partnership, Ron Pierce and TBARTA staff for the support and planning that went into this. Also want to thank Brad and PSTA as always for making your facility available to us. So I want to start out with some background, although I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I know there are many in the room who know far more about the history of TBARTA than I do, but our 2 key milestones are 2007 and 2017. TBARTA was created in 2007 as a regional transportation authority and then shifted its focus to transit when the statute was changed in 2017. Also at that time, our regional footprint was reduced from 7 counties to 5, and the makeup of the board changed to what it is today. The other 2 items on this slide, the vision and the goals, were developed during a previous board workshop in January of 2018, slightly after the statute changes took effect. That first goal was completed when the board adopted our regional TDP, which is also known as Envision 2030, in June of 2020. Envision 2030 identified both short and long-range investments that can help connect people throughout all of Tampa Bay. Sustainable local funding, as everybody's aware, is the hurdle that's prevented any of those projects from being implemented and operated. The statute lists 3 purposes of TBARTA. to plan, implement, and operate transportation for passengers and freight, which seems to be our overarching theme, to produce a regional TDP, and to receive federal grant funds for regional projects, which can now be done directly by TBARTA since we were approved as an FTA recipient also in June of 2020. One thing I noticed when looking at this slide is that the word transit is only used once, and that's in the name of the plan that we have to maintain. Instead, the statute provides greater flexibility with terms such as transportation options and projects. The statute also grants us many powers, which many people may not be familiar with since we really haven't had an opportunity to exercise many of them. But this is just a list of some of them. And you can see that first bullet goes well beyond planning, implementing, and operating. And it also goes beyond transit. The statute does specify multimodal services such as express bus, BRT, light rail, commuter rail, heavy rail, and ferry service. But it also mentions facilities like transit stations, park and ride lots, TOD nodes, feeder roads, reliever roads, connector roads, and bypasses. And yes, it does allow TBARTA to collect tolls. We can also lease property as a lessor, issue bonds, and contract for the management of a facility that we build. We can enter joint development agreements or P3s to facilitate financing or construction of a project, or lease purchase agreements with the department. So we do have a lot of tools in our toolbox. And that brings us to why we're here today. And it really revolves around three things. Does TBARTA provide the value that everyone expects? And if not, what value do you want the agency to provide? And what resources are needed in order to do so? What organizational structure is needed to provide that value? And does it support or jeopardize TBARTA's status as an FTA grantee? And the obvious funding question. TBARTA has never had a reliable source of funding. Should that change? And if so, how? So with that, I will turn things back over to Tina and we will get the workshop kicked off.
All right, thank you so much, David. Appreciate the highlights for TBARTA. All right, so we are going to be using some polling technology. So if you are a meeting stakeholder in this room for the workshop, on the yellow slips of paper in front of you is the instructions. We're going to do a technology roll call, and that's for you all as well. So you are on, I believe you also are all part of this meeting. So please grab your cell phones and log in. Good morning. Okay, here's a thing. So you're going to open your phones and go to an internet browser, go to the provided website and skip registration. Sure, that makes a difference.
You're
It's fine. We just wanted to make it easy so you didn't have to register and go through that. So if you could just enter your name, I just want to make sure that you're able to provide a response. So when we do the next question, that we know that we're able to get your response.
What do you do when it says accept our cookie policy?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm submitting my name like
It'll come
good.
up. It takes a minute. Going through Wi-Fi. I saw you.
You saw me.
I did.
Commissioner Big Sanders, I saw you.
I'm very formal. I should just
We're in
populate it
trouble.
so I get
This is a problem.
it.
Nicole Mills has a question.
All right.
She's raised her hand. Could you respond to her, Chris, please?
Chris, can you unmute Nicole,
No,
please?
no.
Oh,
She's still on mute, unless you want me to read the.
wait, could you please go
you
into
can
the
open her-
You just take a minute.
We're gonna send, it just takes a minute to show up, so if you're waiting for your response. Nicole, I believe you're raising your hand because you need the website, and we're sending it to you via chat.
There it
Yeah,
is.
because I can't access the chat. It won't let me type anything in either. So
Oh, Cliff's up
You can
twice,
tell
too.
where
I do live on your
I might come up 3 times.
That's for our own problem, special kind of voting.
I win, I got 3 times. I'm trying to vote 3 times.
You are.
I had a question asking if the
Let's start.
slides that are being shown today will be provided to you. Yes, all the slides in today's presentation will be in the real-time record. You'll see everything. Anybody have any technical issues, not able to get in? All right, we're gonna give,
hey, I have a question. Are you emailing me the website or are you putting it in the chat? Because I don't see the website yet.
I didn't see Nicole's name come up yet.
I don't have the website.
Sorry, you just came in.
I don't have the website either.
God rest the queen.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, Nicole just was able to get on.
She's working on it.
Wonderful. So she's good to go, so I can go to the next poll?
Yeah, she's probably logging as we speak.
Okay, so I want to take a gut feel pulse before we go through the activities of the value proposition and what differentiates TBARTA from other organizations and the structure and funding conversation. With this next poll, I think you have to drive that next poll for me, please. If you could move that, what is your confidence level in the future for TBARTA? 1, very confident, 2, reasonably confident, or 3, not confident. And this is an anonymous poll. So everything we're doing in this room with polling is anonymous. It's just, we like to take the pulse of the room, and we'll do this poll at the end of the workshop as well.
So if I lost my link, I just go back in the same one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just click on it.
And you can skip registration. We have 17 results in so far.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I got kicked out, so I'm going back in. Should I use the app or not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Giving everybody a minute. We have 24.
Good to see you again.
I'm gonna give it another 60 seconds to make sure everybody has a chance.
I don't think you have to download the app.
No, do not download that. I'm not gonna follow those directions.
Hey,
That's all I'm saying.
I'm in, I'm voting. Participate.
We have another 20 seconds here. We have a message in the chat.
Let's see how to.
That was the last message I had. and
Okay.
we sent out.
Let me just double check this chat for our virtual participants. Just to see what's going on here. Oh, yep, that's us. That was you, Chris. We have one more person logging in, so 1 minute, please. Good time to grab a cup of coffee. All right, PJ, I think we're ready to close the polls. See the results? Okay. So it looks like we're overwhelmingly not confident, starting out this morning with 31% reasonably confident and 4% very confident. So it'll be interesting to see if those stats change after today's workshop and we go through our value proposition exercise and our structure and funding conversation. So thank you for that. All right, so this next conversation, if you've never heard of a value proposition, it's like an elevator speech. So it's kind of like a mission statement, but not. And we're going to talk about why TBARTA is different than other organizations and the value it brings to the region. So on your agenda, on the back side of the agenda, at the very bottom, I put this definition as well, so you can take this along with you. And it just describes that a value proposition is a 1 to 3 sentence statement, and it summarizes in lay terms an organization's offerings, the differentiated feature, target benefits, the audience. And so when we go into our activity, the way you develop a value proposition is you answer 6 questions. And it's just, it can be just little snippets, phrases, words. You just answer the 6 questions. And then together as a team, you take those words and you create your value proposition. So the first question is, what services and programs do we want to provide? The second question will be, what differentiates us from other organizations? Who are our target audiences? What are the benefits received? What pains do our audiences experience that we can reduce? And what are our competing forces? Know our competitors so we can stand out. And together that forms our value proposition. So I'll pause for just a minute.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
This value proposition that we're gonna have to use 6 questions for is the value that we all see for TBARTA.
Yes. Yes, we're doing a value proposition for TBARTA.
If I can't wait.
So we're going to work
Is that,
in teams, and we're taking the hat that TBARTA has a regional transit view and see what ideas we can come up with for the value proposition. Mr. Starkey, did you have a question?
Well, is that if it works the way some of us would like it to, or the way it is? I mean, is this?
It's
real
your
time?
opinions and your team.
About the way it is now.
No, I would think about TBARTA as far as in the future. Let's say TBARTA in 5 years is jamming, it's doing everything we need for regional transit. What does that look like? What's the value that it's bringing?
Well, that.
So with the collaborative process, what we're going to do is break out into 4 teams. So I know we have opposing views. So when you get into your teams, you'll be able to share, answer the questions, go through the 6 questions, create the value proposition. So we'll have 4 teams. Our virtual participants will be in our team 1, and you'll appoint a keyboarder, somebody who is willing to type in the ideas. And then when you come up with your value proposition, then you'll have a spokesperson that will share your value proposition with the rest of the group. So then I'll take those 4, I'll show them up on the screen, and we can highlight the words that really stand out to us. So let's view our template. So your template is just a Word document, and it has an area up above. Can you move the bar for me, please? It has an area up above for the 6 questions, just to add some of the ideas. And then down below has a space for your team's value proposition. Some teams are really great and their words just flow, and they're great at creating elevator speeches. Some of us have more of an engineering mindset and need a template. So down here, I do have a template. Our services help this audience who wants to do this. So there's a template down there too, if your team is struggling with some of the verbiage of how to create an elevator speech. So for our folks online, did you put the link yet? We're going to put We're going to send you to the Collaborative Labs breakout, or excuse me, Zoom link, because this one doesn't have the Zoom capability or the breakout room capability. So we're gonna put in chat the link to our Zoom account. So you'll be logging out of this Zoom room and going into ours. And then after you do that, if you could bring up the slide with the teams, I believe I brought it up on OneDrive there. If you do not see your name on the teams, just raise your hand and I'll come see you and help you find a team. Yep. Okay, so I don't believe we have Commissioner Bellamy and Overman yet, do we?
We do not.
Okay. Hold on, it's coming back up. I want to do the full screen share. So around the room, we have team 1, which is that table there, then team 2, team 3, and team 4. All right, and Nicole, you're going to be in team 1, and PJ will be sending you the link in just a minute. I always feel like I'm talking like to God. And also in team 1, you'll see the names. Team 2, back corner, team 3, team 4. If you do not see your name, just come see me at the front after we deploy to teams. Does everybody know where they're going except those who are not on the list? All right, so we're going to spend, and I wanted to make sure we stay on time. Can I borrow your agenda?
Sure.
Thank you. All right.
I know. I'm gonna go see her after.
You're gonna see me after. All right, so we're gonna be in teams for about 20 minutes. Go ahead and move to your teams. Create your value proposition. Team 1.
Is it virtual?
No, it just has a couple of virtual. Yeah. Nicole, I believe, is the only one, and she's with Florida Department of Transportation District 1. We're going to be joining you on Team 1. All right. Thank you.
Ginger ale in case I need some caffeine.
Hi, Nicole, welcome back.
One cup of coffee a day.
We're taking a quick bathroom break, coffee break. Oh. Thank
He was in this year. Oh, Jeff. I love to go over to the Center Hills here. I was talking to Gil. And your dad. You were there. I was in the plane. Why did you have to get away? Yeah. His wife still at the top of it. They were under honeymoon and I was going to school. Now they got to school. They retired from the business. You found them out. No, he's still working. He's still working. In school too. Still running at school. Still running. When you get you just tell him what I said. I love the school. I love it. I will let it. I will let it. I will let that. Yes, I did. Ron Lee was good. Thank you. Representing the good, the dear North. Oh, yes, absolutely. David, it's a pleasure, man. Thanks for doing it. How are you, Susan? How have you been? Nice to see you. I'm not well as you do. Like you say, I fit. Always both parts. Lifelong. I'm ready. That's you. I love it. Paradise. Paradise.
You know.
Interesting that the last 4 meetings that are really good. We'll discover the peninsula and peninsula of the seven. You know, the peninsula and the peninsula of the seven.
Yeah.
That's what they
So.
I enjoyed this week on the Appalachian Trail. Hammock.
Oh, wow.
Do
you have
In Pensacola, so you heard about it.
My daughter was a rabbit.
You don't feel the you do feel
We don't.
Really like. Looked like the first day up there. You don't think hiking is the application is a vacation.
Vacation from us, right?
I live in the Park City, but I still never. You can't work. I love Park I love, listen, I was in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I served on the national.
Right there by Hot Springs.
So we had town meetings.
A little over about 23,000.
I'm looking to the mountains. Hydrate, hydrate.
That is like pretty cool.
Once you go to the Rocky
Yep, I got it. Thank you very much.
My brother and I used to go out there and camp, absolutely pop up Tampa. I don't think that's right.
You know,
Went to Rocky Mountain National Park. See a lot of wildlife.
yeah, I love.
So we parked there.
Oh, definitely.
It's always a good thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Florida boys, weren't made every time.
They had to make
So we're supposed to be back in our truck. Probably by 7:30, 8 o'clock. Got back to the truck at about midnight. I'm surprised we found
So
She's there.
It's, we learned a valuable lesson.
All right. I want to thank all of you for being willing and open to have this much needed conversation about the value of TBARTA, the future of regional transit in our region. And we will start with team one. Who is your spokesperson? Commissioner Fig Sanders. Please read out your value proposition.
I will read out our value. But let me first preface that by saying, as we sat down to decide what our value proposition would be, we came to the table with the understanding that we would not speak based on past issues that we failed to meet, but as a reset as to where we would like to go. So as we went into our discussion, we resolved the fact that TBARTA's regional transit
Hold on
services.
just a minute. I'm sorry. We have a couple of side conversations in the room. Let's get Commissioner Fig Sanders, team one spokesperson. Read your value proposition. Thank you.
TBARTA's regional transit services support stakeholders by collaborating with local partners, planning, funding, and construction that require infrastructure to maximize a quality of life to reduce traffic congestion, time delays, and parking issues.
Thank you very much. Let's give team one a round of applause. For those of you who are not on team one, is there anything in their statement that is in alignment with what you talked about, or is there anything that stands out for you?
I think the collaboration part is something that we talked about is in ours, kind of
Thank you.
as a regional collaboration.
Team three is quality of life. We utilize those exact same words as well.
Quality of
Which
life.
encompasses work, play.
Yes.
I think it's interesting on team one to talk about parking issues because that's something that we don't always talk about. And there's not a whole lot of economic activity in a parking lot. Better uses for those spaces for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and highlight those just so you know what we called out here. Collaboration, I did hear that at a lot of the teams. And we also talked a lot about quality of life. I heard that in quite a few teams. And parking issues was something that was interesting, brought up by team one. Great job, team one. All right, team two.
All right, I'll read ours. It says, we need to reassess the value of TBARTA's mission given the current environment of transportation regional governance, authorities, and responsibilities. We know what we don't want, but we're having difficulty articulating what we do want. And I think we talked about, you know, the local transit agencies pretty much have all of the authorities that TBARTA has, but they're focused on obviously a smaller area, whereas TBARTA would look at a regional collaboration effort to try to coordinate things beyond the county lines.
Which one did you say was local? That you were comparing it to? Which organization?
Well, I think we talked about what other than statutory authority, most of the things that TBARTA can do through those statutes can also be done by a local transit. It's, I think, what we kind of talked about, ART PSTA.
Yeah.
But that obviously their mission is different than a regional transit agency. Thank you.
Yes.
For the other teams, what stands out to you about team two's statement here?
Regional governance.
Difficulty articulating.
That might have to be the next collaborative lab. Yes. Yeah, I did hear the difficulty articulating as far as the regional transit, what we want.
I think the other thing is that the regional governance complicates TBARTA's mission. I mean, how can we plan regional bus rapid transit if within Hillsborough County, for example, they are defining their own way and they haven't gotten it. You can't have a regional plan until each individual area is on the same page within their area. And so I think that complicates TBARTA's mission. The other question I had is, so what is our actual output then as an organization that's impacted what's happening in Pinellas or Hillsborough or Pasco and the other? So that's how we ended up with that need to define.
And it also is affected by the fact that we have so many MPOs. If you look around the United States, those entity areas where they have really robust public transportation options, the one key factor they have that we don't is they have one regional MPO that have multiples of counties involved in that MPO.
And Mayor, we did discuss that also. And I remember the day we passed our regional project, and there was a lot of discussion at that time about how it would be implemented and how the other agencies would fit into that role as we move forward. And after we took the vote, we felt very good about having a regional project. Problem is, we didn't spend any time really with the other stakeholders like HART and PSTA, kind of going through all the different things that would make a regional system work with those agencies. And that was ultimately our downfall, especially as it relates to Hillsborough County. Commissioner Kemp had brought to our attention several times different things that we should look at. We didn't really agree with her perspective, eventually got a vote. We moved forward with a project that we couldn't implement because Tampa Bay cannot have a regional transit system with the middle not connected. So going back and looking at that collaboration discussion with the regional, with the governments, I do think you can plan regional transit infrastructure, but you definitely cannot do it without the buy-in for the people that are using it. In particular, in our case, HART and PSTA have to be on board with how that transit system actually would serve their needs and elevate the funding to a part where they felt like when we got our project moving forward, they actually benefited. We missed all that part completely. So we had a great project, almost no regional government buy-in, and ultimately that crippled the opportunity to move that project forward. So I think that's a big part of, if we're ever going to put this agency back together, regional planners have to work with the local constituents, or you don't have a regional project. And we're all trying to serve the riders. And everybody in this room that I look around and see, everybody's here that can do that. There's no way we can't do a regional project with this group of people, as long as we get that government part fixed, where we have a project everybody buys into and they understand this benefits me too. So I think that's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish.
All right, let's give team 2 a round of applause. You brought up some great points. Thank you for that conversation that you have. All right, next is team 3. Who's your spokesperson? Yes.
We came up with 3 possibilities, but we selected one that we felt best suited the sentiments of those that were on team 3. And it's that TBARTA seeks to facilitate or embark upon regional transportation options that serve all individuals while enhancing employment and quality of life for growth and development of the region. The purpose for that is because, as has just been so eloquently stated by our chair, regional transportation should serve both for quality of life, vacationing, tourists, night on the town, but it should also serve to inform those organizations, corporations who desire to locate to our community, that we have a way to get the potential employees for them to and fro, but timely, effectively, and efficiently. And so that's why we said all individuals. And we also wanted to use the word individuals because I think all of us have gone to making sure that schools utilize public transportation. Like in Pinellas and Hillsborough, our students get bus passes that they can ride through PSTA and HART, as well as the staff. So that encompasses all of them. But also, in order to develop your region, and I know when I travel when I've been to Salt Lake City, when I've been to Colorado Springs, Colorado, when I've been to Kansas City, other places have so much development because they have found a way to utilize those intermodal facilities for connectivity. We're getting there because we have a number of those facilities coming on board, but we've got to look at a way that respects the other communities that are here at the table, but also serves the mission that TBARTA was developed for, the role that TBARTA was developed for. And so, you know, I'm suggesting that we look at our statements and then find that one project, as the chair said at our last meeting, that one project that we can get behind and begin developing that project to its successful completion.
So it sounds like you're in alignment, especially with Team 1, and you want to explore in the future a project that can be a regional transit project that everybody can get behind and all the collaboration partners can get behind.
That would support funding. Secretary Wynn has already said, if all of us aren't behind, it makes it difficult to fund. But if we can find that one, then there is a greater possibility of having it funded on a state level, federal level, perhaps buy-in from each local municipality or county, and you're much more apt to have success.
Great, thank you. The other teams, what stands out about Team 3's statement? What do you find alignment with?
I mean, like you said, that a lot of that, you know, we had a whole lot of conversation to come down with 1 or 2 sentences. But that value statement, it sums it up, you know, because we're seeking, and they use that word facilitate. That was the word that we used as to how do we see ourselves improving and embarking upon a reset for TBARTA. And the quality of life is huge. You know, while you're writing, you know, you can still be working on your laptop, spending time talking to your grandchildren. And for the growth and development of the region, we are definitely looking to grow and develop. We need to catch up with the growth and development that we're experiencing everywhere else. So I really do like that statement.
Connect all our regions together.
We had a discussion related to the employment that we thought was extremely important if we're going to have a transit system that operates properly. We need to make sure we can get people to the workplace and enhance jobs, job creation, and actually get the benefit of the transit system serving employers, as well as just, you know, the citizens that we want to serve.
You know, Chair, I know Team 4 had the same conversation, and that the next conversation should also have business partners in the room, because they're the ones like, get my employees to work, because they're having trouble get to work.
Yep.
Yeah, bringing them into the conversation as well. Anything else about Team 3? All right, let's give Team 3 a round of applause. And by the way, all of the work that you did answering those questions, that's all going to be in the real-time record. So it's not, you're not losing anything. So you're going to have all that provided to you as well. All right, Team 4, let me scroll down. And who is your spokesperson for Team 4?
Moi.
Commissioner Starkey, moi.
Our focus on regional transit planning and long-term project implementation helps residents, workers, businesses, and visitors throughout the region by increasing economic development opportunities, improving access to jobs, commute times, and making Tampa Bay more attractive as a region. We can address the need for regional transit options with adequate funding and regional cooperation. And so I think we, you know, like everyone else, discussed the same benefits of a regional transportation system, but we also had a very good discussion, similar to number 2, about the importance of local transit services so that our citizens within our counties can even get to be able to access the regional transportation system. So in a nod to what Commissioner Kemp has been saying, they're both important and we need to work on both of them. And does anyone else in my group want to name? Isn't that okay?
I think we just need to be mindful. Regional transit is not an isolated conversation.
Right.
It need to be talked about as a regional system and as a local system is a good foundation. I think that's.
I know in the next conversation that we're going to have about organizational structure, priorities and considerations, that's one thing. And I heard especially team 2, your conversation about who needs to be at the table and conversations that were had that may not have been presented to certain boards. So that is something that we want to make sure we have consideration. So in the conversation, everybody's at the table who needs to be there. For team 4, if you were not on team 4, do you see anything in alignment? Do you have anything that stands out that you want to mention?
Again, it was, I think all of us are on the same page. We're just saying it a little differently.
Yeah.
And the part that stood out for me is the strengthening of local transit services. We talked about that as well. Is that if our local transit services are inadequate, they won't be able to participate in the regional grandeur of what it is that we have and that we envision for us as a region. So I think Team 4 being Team 4 and their final mission statement kind of tied all of them together, because a lot of things of what they're saying is the 3 statements prior to are really concurring with that statement.
I like the improving access to jobs, commute times, because that's even serving on PSTA, that's what we talk about. You know, persons need to be able to get to work on time. When they leave, they want to leave and get home, or if there's an emergency, you know, do they have the ability to access public transportation that will, you know, also take care of that as well. That's something I think we all are aiming for.
I'm going to guess in your county, similar to my county, with the rising rents, I have a lot of constituents who are really starting to struggle. And having 2 cars in one family is really not going to be an option for them going forward. So this is going to get more and more important.
Yeah. Can we highlight that regional cooperation?
Yes.
At the bottom.
Oh, there, thank
Yeah,
you.
right there.
So coming from a mother of 20-year-old triplets, I can tell you having a lot of cars in the household is very expensive. My husband and I are sharing a car.
We joked about it, but somebody in our group, we talked about, it was first mail, last mail conversation. And so someone was like, yeah, people are doing it. They're riding the bus, they put their bicycle on the bus and then they utilize their bike the rest of the way. Or, the electric scooters that we have, now the electric bikes that we have, for some of us, it may not be good on our hair. We don't know how we'll look when we get to work, but.
It's gonna be the new style, Commissioner Powers, the new style. Anybody have electric bike on their Christmas wish list?
I got mine already.
I'm so jealous.
I bought a regular bicycle, but,
all right, well, I want to thank you for that conversation that you had. That's, I think there were a lot of things that were important. We have everything that's going to be included. All of your comments will be included in the real-time record. Let me go ahead and jump to the next. So on this next part, and you already mentioned a lot of it as far as the organizational structure and who needs to be at the table and all the different organizations and agencies that are involved with regional transit. So this is an opportunity to brainstorm your priorities and considerations for organizational structure and funding. But before we jump into that activity, I wanted to bring up Ron. Ron Pierce with RSA Consulting. And he is here to give you some funding highlights. So Ron, thank you for joining us. Glad you could be here this morning.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I was a few minutes late. So when we did the planning call, I thought it would be important just from a funding standpoint to talk a little bit about if we're looking at local funding, if we're looking at state funding, what would that look like? I will tell you specifically from a Tallahassee perspective, as you're going through this discussion, which I think is critically important, by the way, is it's important for two reasons in Tallahassee. Number one is we need to be able to speak in one voice in Tallahassee. And I think you heard Cliff and other board members mention that at the last meeting is if we're not in Tallahassee speaking with one voice as a region on trying to get funding and getting funding for something specific, by the way, I think it's going to continue to be a challenge in Tallahassee. And I think more importantly is if we cannot demonstrate to Tallahassee at some level that right now we just keep asking for operating dollars, which are recurring dollars. So every time we go to Tallahassee and we're trying to get funding that are for operations, one of the questions we're going to consistently get out of Tallahassee is, at what point in time will TBARTA be self-sustaining, and at what time will you stop coming back looking for non-recurring revenue, which is really for recurring items? So as we're talking about funding, as we're looking at that is, I'm not saying that trying to get dollars out of Tallahassee is impossible. I will tell you that it will continue to be a challenge unless we can answer some of those questions as it revolves around A, using non-recurring revenue for recurring items, and number two is having a very clear vision of what those dollars are going to go for. Now, I think there are ways to leverage. A lot of the local governments that are sitting around the table are making investments in TBARTA to be able to leverage those dollars to try to pull down some state dollars. So that's something we can have a conversation about. But if we're coming up with a strategy that solely relies on Tallahassee, I think that could be a challenge. So I think we need to really look at is how do we leverage our local partners, and more importantly, how do we come up where we can speak with one voice from a Tallahassee perspective and not keep asking for non-recurring revenue for recurring items from an operating standpoint. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we thought it was important for you to, I know you've heard me say this a couple of times, but as you're about to go into the next discussion, that I thought it was important for you all to kind of hear that as you all kind of discuss what the future may hold. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Pierce about funding?
When you say one voice, Ron, you're speaking to when there is a request for funding for a regional project.
Mr. Mayor, absolutely correct. So we're looking from a project standpoint, what would that project
So is
essentially look like?
TBARTA now viewed as the voice for transportation for regional projects in Tallahassee?
It is not.
So who do they see? Just individual governments?
I think Tallahassee would argue today is that we continue to speak with multiple voices when it comes to projects. We rally around certain projects, and I think DOT, you would agree, from the West Shore Interchange was a good example of where everybody kind of spoke of one voice. That was a critical component of very important regional projects that we spoke with one voice on. So
That's a 60 interchange.
It is.
So how did that happen? How do we get to one voice?
I think the business community was kind of galvanized and really worked with House and Senate leadership. We've been blessed, obviously, over the last few years of having two presiding officers from the Tampa Bay area. So from a timing standpoint, I think it worked out very well is having the business community come together and coalesce around one very specific project helped do that. And the Tampa Bay partnership, has talked about, I think they're willing to help us galvanize the business community. They can find that project or, funding project we can work on. So
I would be remiss. I mean, I love that you talk about business, but really it's about the community. FDOT worked with that community. So they got neighborhood input and they got neighborhood buy-in. And the reason they got buy-in is because they're actually helping reconnect West Shore. So they're adding with tons of money. They're spending to actually add underpasses that will reconnect the neighborhood. And so by getting the community buy-in, they were able to get it passed. It's not just business. And I really hate to hear business and government when you don't talk about the community that is mostly impacted by it.
And you're absolutely correct. When I'm talking about the business committee, not necessarily on the front end to get community buy-in for the project, but I was specifically talking about is when DOT started making reductions to the work plan. One of the first things they had to, because it was such a large project, is they took that project and took it farther out into the future. which was going to cause problems, obviously, with the, some of the improvements to the bridge and the new bridge. So, so I think when I talk about the business community it was 2 sessions ago, working with House and Senate leadership to get some of the federal and other funds invested to make sure that it not only got back to where it was in the original work plan, but they were actually able to move it forward with the help of Secretary Gwynn and other leaders. So.
And I would say if Secretary Gwynn came and spoke to us, PASCO, because you asked us to sign on to it. And we saw the impact for regional, the improvement for regional transportation that fix would make. So we all use the airport, so we absolutely signed on without hesitation.
Madam Facilitator and Ron, regarding the $582 million collected by the Hillsborough penny sales tax, which is going to the Joint Legislative Budget Commission, and it's not on today's agenda at 1 o'clock in Tallahassee, but sometime between now and the legislative session, what looked like the best way to get the best money for the region and the destination of those $582 million that Judge Barba said should not be a refund, but should be transportation in Hillsborough County, which will also help the region. What's the best way to approach that $582 million destination for regional needs?
Well, I think first and foremost that I think there's a couple guiding principles there, and not to speak for Hillsborough County who's in the room, is number one is to make sure those dollars are spent in Hillsborough County. They were levied in Hillsborough County, they should be spent in Hillsborough County, and they should be spent on transportation projects in Hillsborough County. So I know those are 2 guiding principles that a lot of folks in Tallahassee are working on. I would tell you, I don't think that probably happens between now and next session. I think there's an opportunity now where, for a variety of reasons, that those dollars may be spent as a part of next year's state budget. But I know that a lot of elected leaders from this region, they have, again, not only from a county standpoint, but also from a state legislative standpoint, is they want to make sure those dollars are being used in transportation projects on Hillsborough County. Now, they obviously can be in conjunction with things that may fit very nicely into the DOT work plan. So there's a number of county projects that would fit nicely in making sure that they are working in conjunction with future state plans as well.
And other counties.
Yep.
Thank you, Ron.
Ron. So if we did everything that you had said earlier, work together, everyone's on the same page, we all ask for the same thing, that price tag is probably going to be huge. If it's light rail or something else, probably a really big number. Can we compete with the other parts of the state, Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, to get, and we don't have to have all the money at once, but over a 10-year period, 20-year period, you think we could win that battle to get it's $300 million. Can we get that money incremental to do a light rail or to do something? We could win that fight if we were all on the same page.
I do, but look, that may be better suited for Secretary Gwynn, but I will tell you this. If you look at Tampa Bay's proportional share of what transit dollars have been spent across the state, we obviously haven't gotten our fair share, mainly because there's no project, right? So everybody else has all these other projects. We don't have a project. I will tell you this. I said this at the board meeting, I'm going to say it again. If we think we're going to come up with a project that's magically going to solve our problems, like we're just going to sit here over the next, few months and come up with a project that we all can rally around, that TBARTA could, help leverage and coalesce and get support in Tallahassee, is that's good for a medium and long-term plan, but we need to have a short-term plan as well, because, one of the things, and I said this is the last board meeting, I'll say it again. One of my biggest takeaways from your finance committee meeting at your last board meeting was, if you do nothing and do business as usual, then we have funding for 2 years. We can't do business as usual. So if we're not going to do business as usual, what does that look like moving forward? I think coalescing around potentially a project or a plan is very, very important. But what do you do in the short term as well? Because if we all came up with a project today that is regional in nature, Mr. Secretary, how long is that going to take? I mean, it's going to take some time. That's not a 12 or 18 or 24 month process. To your point, that's going to be kind of drawn out. So making sure that we kind of come up with what a short-term strategy will look like from a funding standpoint, to get buy-in from not only Tallahassee, but I think our local governments as well, but also coming up with, making sure that Tallahassee is on the same page of, if there is a project, I think working hand in hand with DOTs is very important.
And to that point, if I may, Mr. Holcomb, soon to be Representative Holcomb, the response to your question is, that's a very good question, because I can tell you from experience, if we had a project today, backing up what Ron said, and we started working to get that money, I worked night and day here locally and in Tallahassee and at the federal level to get the money to start the Sunrunner line, which we perceived as the catalyst of the 41-mile spine that would eventually be our big system for public transportation options. And it took 6.5, almost 7 years before we got the money. So I think Secretary Quinn will tell you this is not something you can come up out of the, imagination today and think you're gonna get it, to Ron's point, in 2 or 3 years. And you'll see transportation funding, hopefully you'll be on the transportation committee. But transportation funding is incredibly complicated and complex. And it's out there for how, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, Mr.
It
Secretary?
can be, and I mean, we got a perfect example in our region right now with the streetcar. It's in study now for federal funding.
Yep.
Maine was able to help secure, what, 67 million?
Yep.
$67 million several years ago. We made the system free for 3 years to try to get ridership up, which it did. I mean, it's been really successful. But what my fear is that, there's folks in Orlando, there's folks in Miami and Fort Lauderdale that have local money that they can put on a project. The state money we have can't be unlocked until the local match is there, but we were able to get it reserved. And we've been pushing it forward year by year. But at some point, if that $67 million of local money doesn't come, they're gonna say, we need to put this on something, come back and look for it in the future. So finding that local match up front to unlock the rest of it is so key. And I'm not complaining because I know you don't have the local match right now. You can't make the money out of nothing, right? But that's the Achilles heel we have. Sunrunner was a lower cost project. It was,
Right, but my point being, and it also speaks to Councilor Hurtak's comments, it's about changing the culture of the region. Because your average citizen that walks around on the street doesn't have all this information about how incredibly complicated it is. If they did, we wouldn't be where we are today. So it's just not as simple as you might think. And here we are, again, I have to say, and just, Welch knows. We have spent now almost 3 hours and we're still stuck in the same place. I don't see that we've moved forward. We haven't even begun the conversation about what other alternatives there might be. We're talking about the same thing that this board has been talking about since I've been on it. And so as long as we keep doing that, we're not going to move forward. We're not going to move the dial. What we're doing right now today, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I don't see that it's working. Yes, we're all around the table. Yes, we're all talking. But we're not all coming from the same depth of information either. And so here we are, right in the same place. And if anything can pull us out of it, it's the collaborative lab. So what's the next step?
No pressure.
No pressure.
But do you see what I'm saying? We're
Yes.
still discussing the same old.
The reason is it's a lot easier to fail than to succeed.
Amen.
If we can't pull on the same wagon in the same direction and actually get that collaboration going, we'll be here another 20 years talking about the same thing.
Yeah, well, some of us will be
You can't be
dead.
separate silos, you can't be a bunch of
I'm not
different
claiming that
points. And the workshop, it's first of all, it's not, y'all voted on it, I just suggest we have one. It can go either way. I mean, it can provide the definition for unraveling or the definition to move forward. As I mentioned when we talked about it, I'm a volunteer on this board. I don't like coming down here and visiting and doing nothing. I mean, I'd like to succeed with the project. But when I look around the room, I know the people are in here that could move a project forward. We just haven't found a way to speak together to do it. And so I see ourselves as our worst enemy.
Well, Mr. Chairman, when we find that project, we look for funding. I think Cindy Representative Holcomb said He'll be our appropriation sponsor in Tallahassee.
I have an ignorant question, I'm sorry. But to what Commissioner Long was saying about having a regional MPO, what keeps TBARTA from acting, or what would enable it to act as a regional MPO? Is there?
Yeah, there would have to be a proposal set up to do this at the census. I mean, you probably know more of the details, but we'd have to, the MPOs would have to apply through the governor's office to create one, right?
Right, and you need 75% of the population, basically any local government altogether becomes 75% of the total population within the region that we vote for, within the 3 counties, basically, including the county and the city.
Well, is that something we want to look at? That helps us speak with one voice on things that are regional, not local?
We looked at that a few years ago. We had a numerous amount of workshops. It didn't go anywhere.
Well, do we want to look at that again? What's keeping us from doing that?
That's what we've
What's
got
wrong
to
with
stop
that?
saying. Not
Why are you
with this
saying
group.
no?
Yeah.
Wait a second.
What's wrong with that?
There's been not one in 40 years, there's not been any merging in the entire nation of TPO MPOs.
That's
Zero.
not true.
No, that is true. That is true. We found that fact out when we did this.
Well, Citrus and Hernando
and-
did.
Huh?
Citrus and Hernando.
Well, and that's not our problem. Miami-Dade has their own NPO, Broward has their own NPO, Palm Beach has their own NPO. These places have their own NPO.
2 good examples are a metric plan,
You mean at Orlando?
Orlando, which has multiple counties. And you also have in North Florida PPO with Jacksonville, Clay, and what St. John's.
Because
But maybe
if
that's an answer
if
for
I
us.
could, I know that it keeps getting pushed, but I would be totally opposed, as I have been, to Hillsborough County doing that. And if I could, it naturally evolves these places that have their own, that have a MPO like Orlando. It has one city, one major focus, and it has a few spillover areas into the other counties that are the urban areas that work. It naturally evolved. It wasn't something that they decided later to merge. It makes sense. Here, it does not make sense. We have Hillsborough County with 1.5 million people and growing. And I do not see why we would ever surrender, and not be making our own decisions in Hillsborough County. And it would make no sense for us to do that. Again, too, just to speak to this, one of the reasons we don't have the streetcar, we don't have money in Hillsborough County to even do that. We don't have money. We have the most underfunded transit system in the nation for a metro area of our size, bar none, equal to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. But not only that, Pinellas County is 1/3 our size physically and has much more resources than us. We are desperately underfunded, and our focus, and frankly, because of I don't know everybody's service systems that well, but it sounds to me like, and I always thought what this group might be about is strengthening our local infrastructure. And I say local, but it's massive. Hillsborough County is the size of the state of Rhode Island. But I think that has to be the focus first to do that.
Commissioner Kent, and I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know as much as Janet and other people on transportation and federal funding. But if we had a plan that was able to draw federal and say state funding that included strengthening regional local transit as part of the regional plan, is that something that happens? Can you make a regional plan that is eligible for funding in Washington, have components that help, like the last mile, whatever you want to call it, within counties?
There's already, for instance, in Maine, there's supplement needs, we're funding the BRT studies in Hillsborough County. We've got others that were throughout the region that we're looking at. And so we can bring state and federal funding to do the studies. And ultimately, if they were to get federal funding, provide more.
I'm talking about implementation.
They can be right,
not
they can be local, and we can provide some operating costs for a period of time. But the goal is there has to be somewhere underlying all that, a commitment that at some point, whenever that is, the locals take over the operation and make.
Yeah,
Does
but-
that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to say, if we all came together with a plan that brought down that federal money that we keep not being able to access, and it helped solve some of the problems that Commissioner Kemp has, and we're gonna have on State Road 54, going east-west to get to a north-south solution. Then maybe that helps.
So can I interject?
Yeah, I'd like to
Let
recognize
me
Councilmember
interject, and I'm gonna step away from the current conversation because it has been made evident to me that we're discussing something that we definitely need to make a decision on, but we're not addressing while we're here. When I hear things like not with this group, or I've heard Commissioner Kemp say three or four different meetings she's been here, Pinellas County has all the money. We're not making a difference if we come into this room and leave with the same mindset. And I think that's where we were trying, when Commissioner Long said changing the culture, we're not just talking about the residents. I think we need to change the culture of what's going on in some of the mindsets that we have in this room. If we know that our vision statement or our value statement is to provide those services, sometimes you kind of have to step out of your box and say, okay, it didn't work 20 years ago, but we're looking at a completely different time frame right now and different people. So me being the newbie to the group and listening to the comments of what's being said, I can't see us moving any further if our mind is not matching with our steps and our visions and our thoughts. I share it with Chair. If we're going to make a difference, we're going to have to agree to make that difference. Once we make that difference, identify projects. We have projects that align in the front, back of, we have projects. But if we come into the room with the same mindset and we leave with that same mindset, we're gonna be here, well, not 10 years from now. Well, it's not gonna progress. So my recommendation, and I'm just one person, is that we have that difficult conversation as to what it's going to take to change the culture as to what we envision the mission of TBARTA being. Is it remaining TBARTA in its current state, which hasn't seemed to be productive? Are we going to look at and have a different vision as to where we see ourselves 5 years from now? Or are we going to serve as a collaboration, as a facilitator? Are we going to bring our own uniqueness and rebrand TBARTA to become that wheelhouse that everyone we know needs it to be or want it to be? So I just had to, interject there. We can't move forward if we're still stuck in the same position and mindset. My 2 cents.
Can I, just for a second, because I think.
With all due respect, I have my.
Yeah, you were,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Commissioner Flowers, you were next.
The reason I requested this workshop at the Finance Committee and suggested it be brought to the full committee is because I did not want to continuously have this conversation with the other purported partners that we will be looking at, because we don't have our own stuff together. The other thing is, while I appreciate that there have been very strong feelings in Hillsborough, Tampa, as it relates to expansion of bus service or anything like that, this is supposed to be a committee that addresses regional issues, not your city or your county. You address those on your city council. You address those at your county commission meetings. This is supposed to be regional. And I said this in my group, not trying to make anyone upset, not saying that you're wrong for the way you think, but this is supposed to be coming together, looking at projects that enhance, expand, and further the growth and development of our region. There are things, and I'll use this example. I'm not happy the Brightline is going around Pinellas County, but it's too expensive to build what will be needed across the water. So it's going around and we just have to. So regionally, I support Brightline coming because I know what it will do for the region. I'm happy about driving to Tampa catching Brightline and getting to Orlando in 15 minutes versus I-4 nightmare. That's the price that we're paying for that regionalization. You can come to this table as a representative and say, we are not, we are not, we are not. But if you are not, then why are you here? Some people ain't gonna like that, but that's just the way I think. Why are you here? If you're not going to support, you're right here, you're a part of the region. The only way we can make some projects happen is coming through your community. If you can't support that, or if you are not willing for us to address maybe a conversation that was had, because I've had reference to recent conversations as well as 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, lovely Janet, 20 years ago. I wasn't here 20 years ago. The only thing that is pretty much consistent with TBARTA is staff. Other than that, elected officials come and go. So yes, some of us have to be brought along because we weren't here for the fight 20 years ago. So we need to have that information. We need to have that discussion. But if we are not going to address regionalization, and if we are all not willing to give a little something to go back to our communities to advocate for a regional perspective, then we do not need to be here. I'm sorry I got to exit because my brother-in-law passed. I got to get to the church. And I did share with everybody that I wouldn't be able to stay, that I would need to get somewhere by 12. So I really hate talking and leaving because for anyone that knows me, you know I'll stand by what I say. And I'm gonna have to leave, but we have got to get our stuff together. I didn't use that other word because that speaker is on. We have got to get it together, or else we will never advance a regional approach, which is what if you put back up what David Green read from, it's regional. Nothing says that we're gonna solve individual problems. If Hart has 1.5 million people and doesn't have money, Hart's board gotta figure out how y'all gonna get some money. That is not, you gotta figure that out. So, you know, anything that we can do to help, we can do to help. But y'all
That was my suggestion.
Yeah.
Is there some way that our federal?
But y'all got, just like we work to figure things out over here at PSTA. We have been blessed to be very successful. We finally got a raise grant. Hadn't gotten one ever. This was the 4th try.
And he applied for it.
Hadn't gotten one ever. So that's not something I can solve for Hart. Hart's director was here earlier. I don't know if she's okay. That's not something I can solve for Hart. Hart's board's got to solve that. When we're here, we're talking about regionalization. So I'm sorry I gotta leave y'all because I really want to stay for, this is good, meaty conversation, but we're not gonna get to the meat of the matter and even be able to agree on our project, because if our project can't go through areas where persons have made it very clear that they are representing their constituency and the constituency says no, then either we go around them, go back the other way, or we're not here. Hugs and kisses. Pray my strength in the Lord. That's what we say. I'm serious about that part because I am. And my brother also passed, and his funeral is today. And I missed that funeral because I needed to be here. So there's sacrifices. Yeah. And I'm sacrificing because I believe that we can do it. We've got to just stop saying what we can't do. We tell our children all that all the time, right? Stop saying what you can't do. Let's look at what we can do and let's just do it. I took that from Nike. I'll see y'all.
On that same thing, because I think I've got many of the same things you spoke about, that we have a regional purpose. Is that?
Yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner Stark.
Oh,
She was next and then you're next.
Just a couple of things. If you think that I was saying something about Columbus County having money for the transit system, probably misheard, because while they're better off than us, I believe all our transit systems
The only
are.
point I was trying to make is I've heard you say that at least 4 or 5 times. And the only point I was trying to make is I heard you, I understand you, I feel your pain, but we got to move past that. Let that not be a stumbling block to progression. It's a fact. If that's a fact, it's a fact. I'm not arguing factual information. What I'm asking is for the mindset of you coming in. I know it has nothing to do with getting more money than Hillsborough. Let that not be a hindrance to you wanting to work together.
But the problem is, and I'll say this, bottom line is, show me the money. There's not the local money to do these matches that you talk about. There is not that money available anywhere. So what is, first of all, there's opposition to this particular project, and that will remain and be. But even if this was a great project, the streetcar, CSX, whatever, there's not money, zero. So, we don't even have money for basic bus service, which is going to be the first thing. The federal projects, no matter what, it's 50% federal funding, typically 25% state. You've said over and over again, I've had you say it at the meetings, you need the 25% local match. That doesn't come from anywhere. I'm a HART board chair. I can tell you, I have killed for 6 years to do everything, and for 20 years as an activist to increase funding and increase service and increase transit in Hillsborough County. It's not happened for various reasons, the latest being the Supreme Court. I'm not opposed to regional transit, but we don't even have money for local transit first. I mean, Brightline is sure, bring Brightline in. I'm all about it. We don't have to pay a cent. It's not anything to do with us having to pay for it. If you want to pay for the whole system.
Commissioner Kemp, if my suggestion was if we had a regional plan that was able to bring down money from Tallahassee and the federal government that helped put money into your local system, would that be advantageous to you?
Well,
that was my question.
Okay, but first of all, that's not possible from anything I've understood. The second thing.
Secretary Nguyen, is that possible?
I'm not sure I completely understand. I'm gonna ask me if you maybe understood better than me. I mean, from a project by project standpoint, you fund a project. Obviously, if you get more ridership from a regional system that feeds into a local system, it'll increase the ridership and then draw more federal funds for that. But as far part of the system could overlap with the local system, maybe, am I missing anything?
Yeah, as far as transit funding, we don't particularly look at, local or regional. We just look for good projects. We use the same criteria as FTA in the New Start program. So you look at the cost effectiveness, get a rating. Usually you get a medium rating in order to get federal funding, and we use the same criteria. So, if you have a good project, submit to the state, we will evaluate it. And if it's a good project, we're gonna look for funding.
And there's always the 25% match capital, but that isn't even the main thing. Or the 100% burden on operations goes on the county as well, or whatever. That money is non-existent, zero
We can
existence.
provide some operating funds for a period of time, but
Right.
ultimately it is.
But even now, we have some regional stuff, and it's been shaky about whether, like, just a couple bus routes, about whether those operational dollars can be found. So we're subsidizing at heart, even though we don't even have money for local routes and frequency or anything. We're subsidizing some regional routes. And because there's $0 there. So even if I thought everything was magnificent with the plan, whatever, we don't have money for the streetcar, like that'll go away. There's $0 there. That's what I don't think. And despite anything that I have done, and I've worked really hard at it, or, and what has happened, I mean, we just saw 57% of Hillsborough County voters voted to support transit, and it got taken away by this Supreme Court. We had high-speed rail 10 years ago coming, totally paid for. It would have been here by now, but that got taken away by the former governor. I mean, I'm all for all that stuff, but we have to figure out where the money is going to come from. TBARTA has zero money. They're saying, we want this project, we want you to pay for it. With what? So it's one thing is a project, the other is, where is the money? I think if, there is zero money.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp. Councilmember Hurtak.
I guess I thought that this workshop was more about the continuation of TBARTA. So I went to my city staff, and we would prefer to step away and focus on our communications with our neighboring counties. We don't see the value in this currently. So that's kind of where we are. Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Yes, Mayor
comment
Welch.
on that. So I was on TBARTA almost 20 years ago as county commissioner. And it sounds like our first meeting. I mean, it's almost mission impossible
Right.
to be given this regional responsibility when the individual jurisdictions have to get on the same page. Now, we managed to do that in Pinellas with 24 cities in the county, and we're successful. And we heard from folks when we asked for money, get on the same page with Tampa Bay. Well, we said, look, we're on the same page in Pinellas, but there's some debate in the other parts of the region. So let us move forward. And we finally did with Gateway Express, with Sunrunner, being the first BRT, the first transit program funded in Tampa Bay with federal funding. But until you get to that agreement within Hillsborough, within Tampa about what they want to do, even on the regional BRT, how can TBARTA impose a plan when the folks in those jurisdictions aren't on the same page yet? We're on the same page in Pinellas, and so Gateway Express and other things are moving forward. But it's almost, you're getting the authority without the money, the jurisdiction to implement it, and how could TBARTA ever be successful in doing it? And so when somebody says they have no confidence, I think it's no confidence in the model and the task that TBARTA has been given. You know, go solve all these problems in diverse, and it was up to Citrus County. I remember the first meeting I was at, a Citrus County commissioner was saying, you're talking about light rail, we're trying to get bus service. You know, it's so diverse, and I think it's time for it to set.
Amen.
And can I respond to that? And that's why I was so adamant. Mayor Welch was like, okay, like I need you here. Because we wanted to make sure that we had the reset conversation going forward. And I said to our chair, who openly admitted after the study, after it was approved, votes were done, yes, it was a victory, but the conversations and the buy-ins were not there. And so my comment was, we need Hillsborough. I hear Commissioner Kemp, I hear the lack of wanting to participate. And I understand because of the current organizational structure and makeup, that might not be an incentive for Hillsborough to participate. However, the incentive should be the mobility of your constituents. You've heard the mayor say that Pinellas 24 municipalities, we came together because we put the larger goal as our priority. And I'm hoping that everyone in the room will do the same thing. 20 years ago, our lessons learned. Now is looking to the future to better progress our transportation options regionally. I'm just hoping to get commitment from this workshop today, board meeting, whatever we're calling it, that we're able to take that step and move forward with the people that we have in the room, because we have some powerful voices. We have some resources that can do something for our constituents. This isn't about me. I go out there and get my car and go where I go from A to B. But this is about the constituents that elected, especially us elected officials, to make sure that those things happen. So I agree with Mayor Welch that, you know what, Pinellas got it together, but now it's TBARTA's role, in my opinion, to help others get their act together. If that's our uniqueness, to let that be our uniqueness. But I was hoping today to have a closer finalization vision of what our future structure is going to look like. And if we came into the room not wanting to have that, then we just wasted the last almost 3 hours, really. So hopefully we will have a broader, objective view of what today was supposed to accomplish.
The enabling legislation thought if they get this group together, Mayor, and put them in the same room together, over that long period of time, they've been talking about the exact same issues. Consensus would be built, and to be able to promote transit systems for our citizens to ride that cross county boundaries, and all transit systems that I'm aware of, roadway systems, regional connection is important. So I think what they envisioned was this group would be able to bind themselves to a common cause and move forward with regional transportation projects that serve citizens in multiple counties. And certainly Hernando's interest is in that. We're we're not a county right now that would benefit from any specific project. So no matter what gets done in Hillsborough or Pinellas County, unless we're going to a Rays game or something, you know, we're probably not going to be on it. But we saw Tampa Bay came together and were able to speak with each other instead of against each other. Regional prioritization could be accomplished. And what I've seen, unfortunately, I've probably been on the board as long as anybody. We've just never been able to get voices. It'd be like any board of directors for a business. You know, if you had a business and you had a board and they could never reach consensus on what tomorrow's goals were going to be, it'd go under pretty quick. So I share your thoughts. I don't see any reason to get together if we can't cooperate on transit regionally, not locally. I do completely disagree with Commissioner Kemp's perspective on how that works. So my background is civil engineering. I do a lot of projects, and almost all of them start with no funding. We build a consensus of what we want to do, we pull all the stakeholders in, we find the money, and we do understand that it's very important, especially if you've been doing something for 25 years that is still underfunded. If you can get to that point where you sound a lot more like Orlando or a lot more, I watched Miami, we had a trip down there to watch that guy build some stuff down there, it's unbelievable. It's because they showed up one day and they convinced everybody, just like we did near the airport, these projects are worth it. So Tallahassee looks at us right now, and I visit with a lot of folks up there, socially and otherwise. They look at Tampa Bay as disconnected, and they don't believe TBARTA can bring the region together. They don't believe in TBARTA either. But I think it's a reflection on ourselves and how we've tried to come together and failed versus just TBARTA. TBARTA is just a tool. It's just something, you know, they threw together and thought if they got the right people in the room, they could figure out a way. So we clearly have it, to your point.
But, you know, this is the Commissioner Kemp, what I hear, she said, I don't really hear an opposition to regional transit or regional transit planning or providing. What I'm hearing is we just are not willing to invest in it right now because that isn't at the top of our priority list. So if we can find a way to attack that part or take it to the side for a minute while we're figuring out other things, maybe, you know, that seems to be the thing that gums everything up. I'm not saying I have a magic answer how to address that funding part, because ultimately there has to be funding, but.
Well, I also agree with her from this perspective. A regional system can't work without that system working.
That's why we put that in.
There's no regional system without Hillsborough County.
Well, is it possible though to go north and go south and unite Pasco and Manatee? And at least get across the Howard Franklin? And then maybe by then, Hillsborough might be willing to come to the table? I'm just asking, kicks and giggles.
Looking at funding, is there other innovative, smart people that can figure out helping on that funding part?
Say that again?
If the funding wasn't an issue, I think we'd open up all kinds of opportunities. Obviously, there'd be all kinds of opportunities we would all agree to, we'd love to be able to do. And maybe sometime that funding element will be solved, but we don't necessarily have to wait to resolve that funding element to develop the plan, right? If we get support from Hillsborough County to look at it in more conceptual, and ultimately you got to build the finances into it. But at this point, that's what I see as holding everything up, is that it's the finance thing. We don't have the local money in Hillsborough County to put into any project.
But my question is, what if we could find the local money between Pasco, Nellis, and Manatee to start? That's fine. We focus on that. We're already building out 19.
You have to see what the ridership is, whether it would be, you know, favorable to get federal funds. I don't know what ridership would look like along those routes. I don't know if we looked at that or not.
Can I ask a question? Would you be willing to do that? If we started having that conversation about projects, because we know we have no money, nobody has money. So we're just gonna take that out of the equation. If we wanted to start developing something that we can really all come together and stick our teeth into to make TBARTA a step closer to what we know it can be with full participation of everyone sitting around the table. What would that look like with your involvement?
Well, I just think if you have projects that you think you can fund and do, that you want to do.
You keep saying you're a part of this, it's us.
I understand, but it has to be the local jurisdiction has to pay for them and support them. So it wouldn't be me, because it wouldn't be going through Hillsborough County. I think it wouldn't be relying on me or Hillsborough County or the city of Tampa. But if those projects are out there and there's ideas to work on them, I said before, somebody said, well, we're gonna look at veterans or 19 or something. And I was like, okay, go for that, because I'm not here to stop anything from happening.
You're not here to stop, but you're here to participate in truth. And so when you use words like you and go for it, you're excluding yourself. And I'm just asking, you're at the table, you're bringing your energy to the efforts. I'm asking you to consider your position as far as exploratory options to re-identify and reimagine the TBARTA vision and the mission, including Hillsborough County. Could you at least consider doing that?
I guess I'm still not sure exactly what you're speaking of.
Are you in or are you out?
I don't know. I think that right now, the last 6 years has been very frustrating, that there hasn't been a project that, one, the project has not been there, but two, again, I'm saying the resources are not there. So I think as, actually I thought Mayor Welch put it pretty well from 20 years ago to now. There's just not been, they put this, whatever mission, I don't know what that was, and actually it's changed, as we know, actually since I've been on here. It changed from being roadways to being this, but it doesn't make any sense to plug that down.
And we need that, and I'm gonna ask you that, you will take that under consideration, because we're gonna need your partnership.
All right, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Hood. I had an idea, but I needed to call City Tampa to make sure that they thought my idea was reasonable before I went forward with it, because it just came to me when we were sitting in our group. As a project that we could support, that we could do in a short period of time, would be, could we work on the app that would connect all the regional transit systems?
I'm for
I like it.
And ultimately, it has to be done for the citizens.
So, I mean, if we started with something that simple of connecting the different transit authorities through, the city of Tampa is about to launch Move It. And that is something that we're very excited about. And apparently Move It allows you to connect a bunch of different ways. So you can have the Flamingo Fares app, which is what the city of Tampa uses for our bus system. You could have, I forget, we just went down to one scooter provider. They call them something else, not scooters, right? Yeah, whatever. And the electric bikes and everything. I don't want to speak out of turn to which one we've decided on, but so that will be on there, like Uber and Lyft, that type of stuff. It all brings it together. And so maybe that's just one thing we could do.
I like that.
The city of Tampa support that.
Yeah.
If I could just, I guess, elaborate on your comment, Commissioner, about going north and south. And are there any other projects that we potentially could all agree to? We have been working on the US 19 feasibility study, and we're bringing that to a close within the next month or two. We'll be doing a presentation to TBARTA's board about that. So that could be one possibility. And I guess I want to mention another one related to the Regional Rapid Transit Project, the I-275 project, because the concern that I hear within the board meetings is north of downtown Tampa and not widening the interstate, and I can completely appreciate that. I haven't heard any concerns about south of downtown Tampa. So from my perspective, that's still on the table. We could still connect downtown St. Pete, go across the Howard Franklin Bridge through West Shore and to downtown Tampa. That still seems to me to be a viable project. We could still look at express bus service along the Veterans, but Tampa to downtown St. Pete doesn't have anything to do with north of downtown Tampa.
Commissioner. Can I just say, this is another issue that I have with TBARTA is that express bus service already exists. It seems like no matter how many times I've said this and even brought it to the table, we already have bus service going between express bus service that has decent ridership and is a decent route between downtown Tampa and downtown St. Pete that's been done between the two agencies, Hart and PSTA working on it, which I think makes a lot of sense. But so, you know, I don't know, maybe it could be looked at if it could be better, but it goes 9 times a day, unless COVID has changed it. I look it up all the time. It goes from downtown St. Pete to Gateway. I've said this, by the way, at least 5 times at TBARTA meetings, to Gateway, to across the Gandy Bridge, to Britton Plaza, and then to downtown Tampa. It has, it goes like 9 times a day. I know I looked at the ridership. Honestly, I don't even mean to bring it up this way. I think it's a good route to have. It's run by PSTA. That's the way that these kind of make sense and should be done. There's also a 300 LX that goes from the beaches in Pinellas to, and I shouldn't be the one actually explaining this, but it goes from the beaches to Pinellas to the airport. It, I think, goes about 7 times a day. It has lesser ridership. I was surprised when I looked at the ridership for downtown Tampa to downtown St. Pete, that in the year that it operates, a top year in 2017, when I looked at the ridership figures, I think this is all from memory, I think it came out to like 45,000 riders a year that took that. I think it's a very good service. I don't know if it can be improved by being mapped differently, whatever, but I was actually surprised because I know the ridership of the ferry that was in 6 months of that service that costs a lot more, that got like 65,000 people between downtown Tampa and downtown St. Pete. I'm not suggesting I like both of them being there, but I don't know why, like, no matter how many times we say it, we don't seem to recognize that there are already regional operations going on because they've been done between the transit services that are local already. There is a bus, a regular service that goes from Wesley Chapel to USF to downtown Tampa. There is another one for a time that went from just over the border in Pasco in Lutz to McDill, and we were totally paying the fare, and it had not very many hours, but I think we should not be talking about doing things we already have. That's all.
You're running this, so.
Very well, you're recognized.
So just 2 quick things. I love the idea of the apps that will connect the individual. So who has Flamingo? I'm looking at Brad. Doesn't PSTA have Flamingo?
Yeah.
So Hart has Flamingo?
I have no idea.
And we be connecting to others that don't have Flamingo, or they're not integrated already?
Right now, Flamingo is an app.
Okay.
You can pay ride in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and in Orlando. Right now, it can be expanded to the other areas.
So do those need to be integrated, Councilmember, or not?
They are.
Okay.
They are.
But I'd like to explore it. If there's someone using an app that's not part of that, I think that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
but we just hired a new transit person and
Okay.
I don't think she's here.
Should be non-controversial, just giving folks access.
Mm-hmm.
On the other issue, on the regional rapid transit, if Hillsborough solves the north of downtown Tampa issue, is the rest of it, is there a consensus on the rest of that route?
I haven't heard any concerns with anything south of downtown Tampa. And I want to point out that the regional BRT project is a completely different service than the express services that are being provided already. The time of the ride, the number of stops, exactly, the headways, it's very different. Regional rapid transit would be on the interstate dedicated lane. It would be a much different.
Is that one ready to go in terms of buy-in once the north of downtown Tampa issues decide?
So the board actually voted to buy into it from Wesley Chapel to Pinellas. We did have Hillsborough object. But that objection is always centered mostly on North Tampa, downtown Tampa. There's parts of that project
Seminole Heights.
that they're actively not wanting to harden lanes, expand lanes, additional right of way.
There is no additional right of way.
I know, but there's a lot of issues there that need to be resolved. The pieces of the puzzle south in Pinellas, I think, could be worked into a discussion that could have buy-in from everybody, but Councilmember Vic Sanders and I agree that that buy-in needs to start with Hart and the people that we left out of that discussion before. So those local transit opportunities connect to a regional system. And then David and I will both agree, because we know how these engineering projects work. There's a lot to be done in funding and infrastructure, carving the lanes, building the bridge, and eventually getting cars to be able to talk to highways, and phones being able to talk to cars to make these transit systems work. That's going to take a lot of effort before we start getting into the conversation of operation of who uses those facilities. But we had good consensus on that. Thank you.
And I come back to the same thing that I say every time. And I know Commissioner Kemp focuses on the routes that are already there. And to piggyback on that, is there a reason that we couldn't focus in the short term in the next few years on promoting what we already have? Because the thing that I see is if we spend $100 million on this BRT, which I know is also going to be a toll lane, and no one rides it. Because right now I don't see, I hear people saying theoretically that they want to ride, but I don't see it happening. I mean, I know people that say, oh, well, I would love to ride the bus in Tampa, but yeah, it's not worth learning, it's too hard. So how are you going to get people to get on a bus rapid transit from one to another? Because they're also concerned about the first last mile, which is why that app helps connect people to first last mile and the bus itself. Is I think if we focus on doing nothing, but for now, if we can increase the ridership of all the agencies, if you focus on helping every agency increase its ridership, increase the attention it gets, then if we have success with that, I think the city would consider expanding. But right now, I just see it as throwing money away.
Commissioner Holcomb.
So we've been here since 9 o'clock, and I sit here as a commissioner, but I'm leaving in 2 or 3 months as a representative. And my mind is, am I fighting for TBARTA or am I fighting to kill TBARTA? That's the bottom line. And I don't hear Hillsborough and the city of Tampa wanting to be a part of TBARTA. And to the mayor's comment, very impactful, 20 years ago, same argument. So, ma'am, you worked real hard to try and bring people together. I don't see it. We're at 12 o'clock now, and I haven't seen it. And I just think there's a group of people that want to work together, and there's a group of people that don't. So when I go to Tallahassee and Senator Brandis says he's going to put a bill up to get it, why shouldn't I support his bill on the House side? That's my question. And I don't see a reason why I shouldn't at this point. And I'd like to be on, as Ron said, be on appropriations. Bring money to Tampa to fix regional transit. I spent probably almost a year here on that. I have the farthest drive to get here, I bet. And I probably almost always get here earliest because traffic. You know, they want us to be there early, so I allocate for stuff that happens. But I don't have a reason to fight for TBARTA. I'm walking away from this meeting not having a reason to fight for TBARTA. And I was hopeful, but at the end, I don't know what, I don't have that reason.
But the two parts of that are, so TBARTA is just a tool. We keep talking about TBARTA as being like some big elephant in the room that you can't fix. TBARTA is just a legislative tool. You also will be fighting for the region, but you have to have a common voice of what you're gonna fund. So you say no TBARTA, to me, that doesn't mean anything. If Tampa Bay wants money, whether it's through TBARTA or some other entity, or all the business community comes together, you're not gonna fund a project here if they don't have a regional voice to your office.
So we're
And I
gonna,
hear
we are
that
gonna
all,
be
I hear
funding,
that all the time with Tallahassee.
we're gonna be funding Miami and Orlando and Jacksonville.
Guaranteed, they're
Tampa
the
Bay
winners.
residents will be funding
Orlando,
the other areas of the
yes.
state.
And I will say,
Those are the
I'm
winners.
being quite encouraged because, Councilmember Hurtig, I don't think before she brought a project, actually two. Because when you talked about how we can help each other with their ridership, we talked about that in our group, in our breakout group. As something else, the communication piece. Before, I don't think we looked at what we can do for each other. What can you do for TBARTA? What is versus what can we do for the other municipalities? We had that conversation in our team. And guess what? You just brought that same thing to the table. So I think the time that we spent together, we have progressed. We have had ideas that you wouldn't have brought prior to. So to say that nothing has happened, I'm gonna totally disagree. I'm gonna totally disagree because now I think that there's a little bit more of a concerted effort as to what am I gonna take away from this? What are we gonna work with Hillsborough on? What are we gonna give them to help them want to be a part of this? And I think that's the mindset change that we talked about in our group. I agree that maybe 20 years ago, we may have had the same conversation, but guess what? I wasn't here 20 years ago, I was in high school.
Okay.
So it wasn't the same conversation because it wasn't the same people and it wasn't the same focus and it wasn't the same priority. That's all I'm gonna say, but I'm encouraged and I'm really hopeful, especially with the participation that we've gotten from Hillsborough today.
Yes. Going back to a question that was raised, if we work on the Pasco, maybe Hernando, Spring Hill, the US 19 project, that is regional. And if there's another one that's regional that doesn't go through downtown Tampa and the Seminole Heights area where it seems to be the issue, can we go to Washington with that program and can we go to Tallahassee? Can we move forward as a region?
I guess we have to see what the ridership and so forth was. If we look at it as a $40, $50 per ride cost, federal government's not gonna participate. I don't know. Depend on, could we get a medium rating or something from FDA, whether it would be really feasible moving forward without it being more funded by the local agency.
But you already believe in the South Tampa to Pinellas connection. You're spending a lot of money on that connection already.
Well, that would exist just in the form of express lane.
Yeah, express lanes that are being developed.
And quite honestly, Veterans has kind of express lanes on it.
That's what I use.
And I'm encouraged by things like the Moffitt Campus Center up there, all those people that work up there, they have a way to get there, from around the region and do a circulator, they take them around that 775 acres, whatever it is, it's gonna be.
760.
Or downtown Tampa.
It's the same size as downtown Tampa. And then we have some companies from another country that have bought 200 acres below that for expansion of the same type of use. So it's really 868 acres of a life sciences center that's coming.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. It's bigger than downtown Tampa. So to say, that's why I say we are planning today for what's coming in the next 20 years. And we in Pasco know what's coming. Never mind what we just approved, that's 52 and 75, millions of square feet of light industrial.
Hopefully in that whole development, they're gonna plan things like where do we put park and ride lots if they're gonna support things and all that will I mean, it'll become much more expensive after all that.
Right, and we have our vertiport as well, Commissioner Holt.
Councilmember Hurty.
And I think that feeds really well into the idea that I have, that if you focus on the transit that already exists, then the first ridership cost goes down. Because that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, if there aren't enough riders on it, they're not going to fund. So how do we push ridership so that we can get the funding?
Mr. Stark?
I think, at least what I've learned from sitting on TBARTA is that that kind of bus transportation system is a different animal than what we're talking about. And as David Green just said, the rapid transit bus is akin to a light rail, but on wheels. And when we did, and you weren't here when we did the study, and I was hoping we were gonna go over the study, I brought a copy of mine so that the new people could see what it was that we were talking about. But my recollection is when we went towards this as our first of what I hope will be many regional programs, this was akin to light rail, but on rubber wheels, and was the cheapest form of transportation, of transit that we could get going in the region. And that is why the majority of this board settled on this solution. Not, hey, the CSX rail line is the best route for my county, and maybe for Hernando as well. But when we looked at the cost of it, it wasn't feasible at the time. And so we went, this route was very cost affordable and doable quickly, because back then we thought we could have it up and running in 5 years. It would have been running today if we, or soon. And so, and look at, we would have been really positioned for some of that money that's come out in Tallahassee. So, Washington.
Yeah.
We would have been in really
Yeah,
good shape.
just
So
Mr.
it's not the same as the XL or whatever those
It
numbers
couldn't have
are.
been,
It's a different kind of animal.
it couldn't have been up and running. We've asked Secretary Gwynn, I have asked him, it was predicated on the express lanes being built. So even, that it would not be up and running.
It could have been in the funding hopper.
Well, it relies on the express lanes being built in order to have it. He said it was 10 years. They used to say CSX would take 10 years and this would take 5 years, that was part of that study too, which was totally ridiculous. Because CSX could take 5 years and this will take 10 or 15 years before they ever have express lanes.
Councilmember.
But it still goes back to how to get people on the bus.
Yeah.
If you don't have a culture already of people to ride it, it's not gonna happen. And that's what focusing on the entities that already exist to encourage people. I mean, we just, as a region, we do not ride buses. We just don't do it. And if we focus on getting people to ride the buses that we have, then the idea of a bus rapid transit system makes more sense. But right now, it just doesn't.
Thank you, Mayor.
Which goes back to the Mission Impossible aspect of this. The reason folks don't ride the bus is because it would take an hour and a half to get to here from South St. Pete. I had a niece that did that because we are underfunded our bus system. So this Hillsborough referendum comes up is probably the most important thing, because until we get that base funding for PST and HART, people who have a choice like us are not going to ride a bus. We're not going to wait an hour outside in the heat. And so that is a critical infrastructure we don't have for transit. And TBARTA can't fix that.
But TBARTA can help.
They can help if it's allowable under the new regulations. I mean, we can't even talk about Penny for Pinellas, for example, anymore under the new legislation.
It is getting, it's 12:15. I did want to honor your time. I think we have had a very valuable discussion. I know you did you want to make one more comment before we close out? Commissioner Starkey, she had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just, we're rapidly growing like other places, and a lot of the folks who are moving down to come to work in Pasco County are coming from New York and areas where they ride transit. And so I just want to reiterate that my recollection when we did the study is that we're not looking so much at the transportation disadvantaged people who are needing to ride the bus to get around. The focus of what we're trying to build is for that, really that business community, maybe the commuters to work, to have alternative ways to get to work. And that's a different person than a transportation disadvantaged person. And it's my understanding that that has been the focus of why a regional transportation network was so important, and why the business community hears from their likewise companies that may want to move here or just moved here and said, well, we're coming from New York or New Jersey or Connecticut, and our workers had options to get to work, and here there is no option but your car. And so what's going on in Tampa Bay that you can't get your act together?
Chair, did you have any closing words for the workshop?
I think the chair spoke enough today. So we were wanting to visit with each other and see where TBARTA might fit into the future of transit planning in our area. And I guess my takeaway that I find the most interesting is keep talking about TBARTA like it's some entity, like it's something other than us. So we talk about TBARTA can't do this and TBARTA can't do that. Every time that goes through my head, it means we can't do it. That's what I keep hearing. And I have to say, you know, kind of listening to the input and the dialogue today, we're still not to a point where TBARTA could be meaningful because we really aren't agreeing with each other on what regional transit systems should look like in the Tampa Bay area. I find that to be a shame, but I'm a realist, and I don't like to bang my head against the wall and keep trying something that's never going to work. But Tampa Bay has a lot to offer. It's a real popular place right now in the state. For the first time in my life, most people talk about Tampa Bay more than Miami, more than Orlando. And start getting its place, you know, and its jive, and people want to come here. And the Tampa Bay thing, the sports and the hockey and all the different things it's got going for it. And no agency, no matter how it's put together structurally, is going to accomplish anything if they can't agree with each other. So as long as we have this much division on the board, it's going to be hard for us to get our rudder in the water.
May I address that for one moment, please, before we all leave? I just would like to commend Councilor Hurtak for her comment quite a few minutes ago, because I too thought we were coming here today to talk about solutions and other opportunities that could potentially be on the table in order for us all to move forward. And we haven't even begun to talk about that. And it's a big disappointment, quite frankly, because I thought that's what we would finally agreed that we wanted to do.
Well, Commissioner Long, if you're talking about whether we stay by ourselves or go under the Regional Planning Council, I don't see what difference it makes. Well, umbrella we're under, if we have no plan and we've tried to have a plan for 20 years and we can't have one, what difference does it make whose umbrella we're under? It's kind of what I'm thinking here today. But because I see two big players who aren't thinking that it's important, frankly.
Councilmember.
I'm not saying I don't think it's important. I just think that there are steps to go. And I really think that the idea I brought is a good way to start, but if you don't, I completely understand that. But I issue a challenge. I want you to raise your hand if you have gotten on a bus in the last month, everyone in this room. Okay, that's actually impressive. So what I would challenge all of us to do, and I'm not saying to cross a bay, but get on a bus at least twice before the next meeting. I don't care where you go. Learn how to ride it, see the positives and the negatives, because overall, Tampa Bay does not understand buses and transit, and they just as a transit mechanism. They just think it's for folks who don't have cars. So let's flip the script. Let's ride the transit system, find things you like and things you don't like, other than the fact that it takes too long to get somewhere. No, seriously, because we gotta start somewhere. And if you don't have the actual experience of riding the bus, that's what we have now. Let's start somewhere.
Well, I think you should ask, do you ride transit and have you ridden transit? And yes, whenever I go to a city around the world, transit is my first option. I'm not gonna rent a car and try and drive in from the airport. I always look to see if there is a transit opportunity to get me to where I'm trying to go.
Well, I do the same thing, but then I came back home and started taking the transit here. So understanding transit somewhere else is not the same as understanding transit in your backyard, but by actually physically using it. And that's just what I encourage everyone to do, just try it, just to see how it goes.
Just for the record, not having ridden transit last month is different from not knowing how it works. I rode transit for years. Growing up there, so I know how it works.
I know, but I'm just saying.
What's the ridership of?
I know what I'm saying.
Well,
yes. Mayor touched on it. Because I experienced this living in the DC suburbs. We are not getting out of our cars, period, unless it's painful, with all due respect. If you want to take a test and riding the bus, that's fine. But regionally, it's workforce. We need to get workforce to their location in a efficient, effective manner. If it's going to take 4 hours, no one's getting on the bus. I don't care what their experience is about. Their experience is going to be 4 hours, and they're like, I'm done. I actually get in the car with my wife and let her drive because I have 2 cell phones and I'm attached to them. So I used to be the control person and had to drive. I don't drive anymore so I would ride a bus if it was efficient and effective to get me where I needed to go. It's not. We have cars, we want our cars, we want our freedom. So we're gonna keep that mentality until it's too painful to not have your cars and take a bus or a train like you have to do in DC, in New York City. I'm sure there's many other places that fall into that category. The way Tampa organically grew, and someone was talking about Colorado or Denver. I used to live in Kansas City. There's a lot of land out there, and they grew very differently than the East Coast has grown. So we have very limited space in this region. So it's going to be a big infrastructure change to do light rail or even the BRT is less infrastructure, but with what we have available, it's going to be, as I was saying to Ron, it's giant dollars. So if we get on board with something, and maybe we can eat the elephant one bite at a time, but we got to figure out what that is, and we got to get folks at the table to agree on that.
And that is so encouraging. And to me, what I just heard is now you've given yourself and us a reason for you to go to Tallahassee.
Well, thank you all for letting Collaborative Labs be a part of this discussion and to facilitate this workshop. Appreciate all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today. Hope you have a wonderful, safe weekend.
Thank you. Good job.
Can I ask a question before?
Some of the people that didn't work.
Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so we had a lot of conversation and it sounds wonderful, and I'm echoing with what Mr. Ron said. The purpose of today changed, yes, not a bad thing. But what are gonna be our next steps? Can we kind of have that in mind before we discuss?
I would like to go through what we've heard today through Collaborative Labs. She said she'll have that to us by Tuesday. I hope you all will dive in and kind of look at all the different conversations that were going on around the room. And then we do have to have that sit down session that Janet's been wanting to have, excuse me, Commissioner Long.
Okay.
And decide, I guess, and I kind of, Commissioner Starkey and I are similar in this way. I don't think it matters as much what we call us, but Tampa Bay's got to come together, and I am very interested in that.
And I think all of us.
So I think we focus on what you've been talking about the whole time. Is there a collaborative way to get us together so we can have one voice in Tallahassee? If we do, we will get more money, and it will benefit Hillsborough.
And did I understand that we have 2 potential projects now? One, the app, and everyone, and then the other one is increasing information and communication of each ridership.
Mhm. That's something everybody built consensus on.
Okay, all right.
And I'd like to continue to drag David's thoughts along, connecting South Tampa Bay to Pinellas.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of investment potential there that would really benefit the region. Because it's not just hopping on a bus and riding it somewhere. We've probably all had that experience. But the rapid transit connection with a smart bus in a lane with a vehicle that can talk to the phone and the road is a totally different type of investment to make, and they're very efficient. I also travel a lot, so you know, if you go to London, wherever you might be, you're gonna jump on that system and go. You're certainly not gonna be in your car. That seems to be a really congested area that could be connected, and maybe a lot of benefits provided if we continue to pursue it. So we'll keep that on the list, potentially collaborative efforts.
So if a region, if Hillsborough and Tampa come together and TBARTA says, let's use that connection as the first beginning of a regional plan, is that enough to bring us federal money?
Yeah, look at it. Then we have to put a little more effort into looking at that specifically. That hadn't been really looked at that.
It's kind of, you know, we signed on to your interchange efforts. And so, I mean, if we all sign on that as the first leg, I'm in, Pasco's in.
If it was to me, if it looked like it would be a big candidate for federal funds, then of course I would have supported the region would help. But we'd have to first find out if it's even a big candidate.
Maybe we could call it part one of the first piece of the big one. And if Hillsborough maybe say the big one could move forward one day. Hopefully they won't listen to these minutes. And they may not be willing to be on board right now, but sometime in the future. But that's our first leg. Can we move forward?
Well, and you may not even realize it, but we already have a bus on shoulder project influence that's up and running. It's recently got up and running.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's pieces in works. So.
But if we kept that section in, and I think that link, I can't remember how all the links were, but it'd probably be pretty easy to take that section out and look at it standalone.
Yeah, but you know, a lot of that would be over the next 8 years or so between Western Interchange, Howard Franklin, and then express lane down to St. Pete. There's gonna be a ton of construction going on for that. So they'd be running in general purpose lanes at that point until the express lanes go up and running. So it would not be a true premium service at that point.
Until they're up.
So and then it's an easy premium service. You put in the express lane and then you come on it, high speed in the express lanes.
All right, thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
All right. See you there.